I offer these every week along with a guided meditation. Just click the subscribe link below to be notified through YouTube when I post the latest recording. Or if you'd like to join us live, which would be great, just go into the description section below and follow the link along to be able to sign up for free. So I'd like to enter into my talk about the perfecting over time of generosity and its necessary other side of the coin of appreciating. I'd like to enter into that with a little bit of an explanation of what we were doing during the meditation and how that connects with some very cool and useful brain science. So you will recall that during the meditation, I was encouraging you to be aware of what you could find that was enjoyable or meaningful or worthy of appreciating in whatever you were experiencing, including the broad settling in to a sense of meditation. And a reason for doing that relates to a very interesting thing, which is that in early Buddhism, which heavily emphasized renunciate practice and a willingness to endure quite uncomfortable circumstances, living in poverty, having just your robe, no stable source of food, not possessing anything. You're pretty exposed there. And yet, in the 5 primary factors of entering into the non-ordinary states of consciousness, known as the jhanas, whose 4 of which constitute the 8th and final element of the Eightfold Path, right concentration. Of those 5 factors, interestingly, at least 2 of them involve fairly intense, emotionally positive experiences. The 5 factors are, in Pali, a key language of early Buddhism, vitakka, which means applying attention, such as to the beginning of the breath, if you use that as your object of absorption. Vichara, which is sustaining attention along the course of the breath, with a very interesting analogy given by a friend and teacher of mine, Sally Armstrong, who used the metaphor of ice skating, where you plant your attention, like planting your foot, the beginning of a movement in ice skating. That's vitakka. And then vichara, you're gliding along the full sense of the exhalation. And then vitakka, again, you're planting your foot like in ice skating. And then vichara along the full sense of the inhalation, again and again and again. Okay. Then the 3rd factor, traditionally listed, is sukha, which can be broadly translated as, on a range, happiness, contentment, and tranquility in a general sense. It's pleasant. Pleasurable, enjoyable experience. Sukha. The root of the word for sugar in the English language comes from sucrose, and the root of that is sukha in Sanskrit, whose close cousin is Pali, as a root in the Indo-European languages. Oh, there's a sweetness in sukha as a factor of concentration. And then we have piti, P-I-T-I, PT, which is translated variously as bliss or rapture. Wow, intense, potentially almost even overwhelming, pleasurable body experience, maybe with a sense of pulsing or rushing. Who knows, maybe that relates to Kundalini energy. Sukha is not translated down typically as bliss. That's more PT, P-I-T-I. And then we have the 5th factor, ekagata, which also is pretty enjoyable. It's a sense of the unification of consciousness, singleness of mind. Woof, really, really settling in. Right? There's a lot of teaching about these 5 so-called jhana factors, a lot of other teachings about the jhanas. I won't dive deep into that right now. It's interesting that 2 out of 5, 40% at least, of the jhana factors are really positive in a context of a religious or spiritual tradition, let's say, that is perfectly prepared to be uncomfortable. Wow. Well, why might it be that sukha, let's say, let alone piti, that intense blissfulness, could help to stabilize attention? This goes to some very cool recent brain science. So, if we are to sustain attention to something, and then as a result, even become increasingly absorbed in it, uh, both to strengthen those qualities we're experiencing, since neurons that fire together can wire together. So the longer we stay with an experience and the more embodied it is and the more rewarding it is, the more it sinks into us, hardwiring itself into our nervous system and establishing it in itself increasingly as a trait. So we develop trait peacefulness or trait calm strength or trait self-worth through factors like sukha, which help us to stay with the experience, feel it in our bodies, and have it be rewarding. All right. How does that work in your brain? Well, if you're staying with an experience, it is being stably represented in the neural substrates of working memory. It's staying there. Those substrates primarily are in the upper outer frontal regions here. Think of them as sort of like a whiteboard in the brain onto which new experiences are written and they stay until, whoosh, the next experience comes along in the neural substrates of working memory and moves it on to the next one. So the question becomes, what stabilizes the contents of working memory, which is a way to operationalize a sense of absorption with its benefits, as I've said, in deepening and reinforcing that which you wish to grow inside, to grow the good that lasts inside. What keeps them stable? Well, those substrates of working memory have a kind of gate. And that gate is controlled by dopamine, a key neurochemical. When the gate is closed, the contents of working memory remain stable, and you are increasingly absorbed in whatever, the breath, a sense of spacious awareness, a feeling of lovingness, a sense of profound inner peace, whatever floats your boat, as a result of the gate staying closed. Okay, what opens the gate and what keeps it closed? The gate stays closed to the substrates of working memory, so we can stay stably present through ongoing releases of dopamine, stable flows of dopamine. When dopamine, which tracks both reward and expectation of reward, when dopamine levels drop, the gate opens and other contents, other distractions can whoosh, flood into the substrates of working memory. What also opens the gate, besides dopamine dropping significantly, is dopamine spiking significantly, because that indicates there's an even new, better thing to be attending to. So imagine back in the day, or even these days, our ancestors, or back in the day, monkey in a tree, eating a banana. Bananas in its tree, let's say, and some kind of monkey. And as long as there's a banana in this tree, the monkey just pays attention to this tree and this banana. It's all good. On the other hand, if the monkey runs out of the banana and there's no other bananas in this tree, it starts looking around. Other trees, other opportunities, right? So dopamine levels have dropped, the gate opens, and new stimuli can flood in. On the other hand, here's the monkey hanging out on the tree, yum, 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 eating the banana. It's all good. And then suddenly, this really attractive other monkey whoop, jumps onto a branch nearby. Spike of dopamine, new, even better opportunities. Gate opens. Hey, how you doing? In monkey world, monkey land. It's an ingenious, simple neurological mechanism. This means that when our ongoing experiences are highly rewarding, emotionally positive, or physically pleasurable, or cognitively meaningful to us, the gate stays closed. And in particular, when those rewards are kind of at the peak of their range, highly enjoyable, highly absorbed, in the lusciousness of whatever we're experiencing, not out of clinging to it, but out of helping ourselves to internalize things in lasting ways so we're less craving toward them. When those rewards are high, then there's no opportunity for a spike in dopamine levels because it's already at the top of its range. Wow. Wow. Intensely positive sukha and piti, happiness and bliss, are skillful means and aids to deep absorption. And in everyday life, opportunities for really, really steepening our own growth curve, our own learning curve, as we develop, as we cultivate the qualities that, while we're experiencing them, are associated with a lot of emotionally positive experience. And this is a very important mechanism as a counterbalance, in addition to its inherent value. This mechanism is a really important compensation for and a balance for the negativity bias of the brain, which is innately biased toward rapidly learning, rapidly being affected by permanently emotionally painful experiences. There's a place for that kind of learning. Once burned, twice shy, okay. But past what it is, whatever is useful, is excess suffering. So now this relates to the topic in particular I would like to explore with you, which is generosity and its complement, which is appreciation. As we appreciate and thus enjoy whatever is beneficial or valuable in what we're experiencing, that deepens the learning from it. It deepens its registration in the neural nets of memory, which is one reason why I particularly focused on that in the meditation we just did. And so I want to relate that to what in Buddhism, both early Buddhism and the Mahayana developments over time in Tibet and through China and into Japan and now into the West, I want to focus on what are called the paramis or paramitas. This is a list of, in some cases, 6, in other cases, 10, with an additional 4, of very normal, human, natural qualities which can be developed and are perfected in those who are completely awakened. The first one of those qualities that is routinely listed in, I think, in Pali, and there's a similar word, I suspect, in Sanskrit, is loosely is dana. I think typically pronounced dana. That's how I've heard it, which translates as generosity and the giving of oneself. It's a lovely phrase, isn't it? The giving of oneself. Dana, just ordinary generosity. I'm thinking here of the unusual fact that in certain primate species, certainly human species, there is a giving of food. Most species do not share food with each other, particularly anything beyond a mother sharing food with her child. Even in the several hundred primate species, of which we are one, I think in less than 5% of them does a father ever offer food to his primate child. So giving and sharing in this broad way is really quite unusual, and there's something really particularly touching about it. So first I'd like to talk about, somewhat briefly, giving itself. This does not mean that we should overgive. This is not in support of what is sometimes called pathological altruism, where we overgive for different reasons, sometimes because we are socialized into that role, sometimes because we are pressured into that role, sometimes neurotically we identify as a giver who then has claims on others. Those are all different aspects of what might be called unhealthy, unwise altruism. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the giving, the generosity that is sustainable, it's within your range, and is both a gift to the recipient and, as it moves through you, a gift to you as well, a gift to the giver. There are many forms of generosity. We tend in the West, with our emphasis on materialism and money, to focus on the giving of charity or the giving of a tip or putting $1 in the jar wherever you get your coffee. There's a place for that in this gathering here. I don't often talk about it, but I welcome your generosity, including financial generosity. It helps me do this and have a staff that supports me in doing this. Great. The worldwide economy that's involved in charitable giving is really quite extraordinary and huge. And we could think about what a world would be like without that. I will say that I've been very struck by the work recently of a Dutch historian whose recent book I think is called Moral Ambition, who, as I heard about it some years ago, was at Davos amidst all the muckety-mucks there. And apparently he kind of scandalized the group. I do not believe they've invited him back, in which he said to them all, the world, to all these billionaires and venture capitalists and, high rollers and all that, he said to them, it's nice that you give money and so forth, but honestly, what would help the world a lot more is if you just paid your taxes. If you quit exploiting loopholes, I believe worldwide, or at least in America, worldwide at least, I think there's something like $600 billion a year in subsidies going into the oil and gas industry through various means. Wow. So there are ways in which I want to acknowledge that the giving of money can be a way to, avoid more fundamental, profound forms of giving. I'll just note that in passing, trying to stay out of, too much controversy here. And so much of the dana in this world and in this life has nothing to do with money. And often it doesn't have anything to do with anything material. So non-financial material gifts are things like, offering people food or giving them objects of different kinds, clothing that you really don't need, you're happy to share it, letting them live with you for a while, maybe they need a place to live, there are different kinds of generosity there. And beyond all that, wow, think of the intangible forms of generosity. Think of your attention right now, the giving of attention, the gift of attention is a form of dana. Thank you. Think of the deliberate practice, including with people that are kind of exasperating. It's good for you, but it certainly is good for them and involves often a kind of generosity, letting other people have their say. There are forms of generosity that have to do with not doing, like not interrupting, not giving them your infinite wisdom, not repeating unwanted advice. Once is enough, unless you really, really need to say it again. There are many forms of generosity. So I would like to just pause for a moment and give you an opportunity in your own reflection to think about generosity in your own life. First, paying attention to how generosity is already a beautiful stream, a beautiful current running through the river of your life these days. And it's particularly important, I think, to highlight forms of generosity that don't get much attention, like patience is a kind of generosity. Just acts of service in your home or with other people. Turning to another person with love in your eyes. Kindness. Experiencing and sometimes expressing compassion. Generosity. forms of service, donations, if you have it, to give it. I have the means to be, for me, I think of it as retail Donna. What I mean is I just look for opportunities like with service people or otherwise to leave, for example, very large tips. That's an opportunity. And for me, there's something about it that also a form of generosity is wealth redistribution. Many of us, me included, have material conditions that are the result of three things: luck, good or bad; second, effort; and advantage. Certainly in my case, that last factor, advantage, is achieved through disadvantaging others. And it's not 100% of what one has, but it's, for many of us, speaking of myself, certainly not of everyone, it's definitely at least 1%, if not a lot more than 1%. Well, there's something about wealth redistribution. If part of what you have is ill-gotten gains, why not be motivated to share it? Not to salve a guilty conscience. Often you are not deliberately trying to steal, in effect, those gains. You just live in systems that give them to you. And people, or rather, and because you belong to a group of people that, are advantaged one way or another, unfairly. And so we don't need to have shame about that, but we may have sorrow and a sense of moral commitment to the generosity that in some portion at least is a redistribution of what we have acquired unfairly, actually. And it takes a fair amount of courage to recognize this. And it's helpful to keep remembering it's not your fault that this was acquired, but it is perhaps your responsibility morally with regard to what you do with it. So I'll just mention that in passing as something perhaps to reflect on with your how you think about generosities. So, for example, in myself, I know for a fact that just in my own life in America, being male and white and straight, but certainly male and white, opened doors for me that were statistically less likely to open for people who were neither male nor white. I just know that's a fact. It's an undeniable fact in America, certainly as I moved into adulthood in the 60s, 70s, and beyond. So that's a fact. And there are other forms of advantage as well that go back generationally. Opportunities my parents had that equivalent people of color in America did not have in that generation, and so on. So I'll just leave it right there and see for yourself whatever you want to do about this. So generosity. Generosity as the first of the 6 or 10 perfections or paramis or paramitas. You might want to take a look at a Wikipedia entry or teachings in depth, such as in the beautiful collection of Buddhist resources at Access to Insight, accesstoinsight.org, freely offered. You can look into these perfections, and you might want to take a look at that list. So I'll read you the 6, and then I'll expand it to the 10. So the 6 that are typically listed at a minimum, where am I here? Oh, I'll just list the 10. Here we go. Generosity, giving of oneself. Virtue, morality, proper conduct, sila. Third, renunciation, releasing and relinquishing, non-clinging. Okay. Wisdom, that's the 4th in the list. Energy, diligence, effort, vigor. 5. Patience, number 6. Tolerance, forbearance, acceptance, endurance, number 6. Patience is a highly underrated virtue. I came off a retreat some years ago and I tried to have some kind of takeaway and, a key theme, and it was like, oh, wow, patience. Patience, really good. All right. Truthfulness and honesty, That's number 7. Determination, resolution, number 8. Number 9, metta, which is to say friendliness, loving kindness, goodwill. And then number 10, equanimity, serenity, upekkha in Pali. So you can see that list. You might look at that list and see, does one really pop out for you these days as an opportunity for practice? Generosity. It is often said that as the Buddha traveled around, one of the first principles he taught was generosity. There are many forms of generosity. One of them is the giving of forgiving. As it is authentic for you, forgiving others and forgiving yourself as an aspect of generosity. Generosity. Now, what supports generosity? What helps us gain the value and act on the advice and wisdom of our root teacher, the Buddha, and this long tradition that has really appreciated these 6 or 10 qualities, the one that's first listed typically being generosity. How do we cultivate it? Well, for you to get the benefit of generosity, often it's supportive for others to receive it and even appreciate it. Or to go the other way, for others to get the wholesome benefits of generosity toward you, it's really helpful when you can for you to receive it as appropriate, without being manipulated by others, but appropriate, sincere giving toward you, and appreciate it. So I want to talk here about appreciating and the power of appreciating in your life. Appreciating does not mean overlooking injustice or problems or what's gone wrong or, is really a work in progress with someone, that you're who works for you or you work with or you're in a relationship with. Alongside that, what else is true that you can appreciate? So you might take a moment here and kind of reflect on maybe somebody in your life, even someone that, as the German proverb puts it, is mixed pickles. It's a combination of things, right? What do you appreciate about them? Yeah. You can certainly broaden this to things that you're grateful for in general. Gratitude and appreciation kind of overlap. I'm deliberately focusing on the word appreciation because I'm going to turn it in a moment quite deliberately. So we can think about people that you appreciate, and you might ask yourself, how are you about expressing appreciation? So think of 3 steps here. 1, recognizing what is factually worthy of appreciation. And you decide what is worthy of appreciation. Great. If it is factually worthy of appreciation, are you recognizing it in other people and in the world around you? Okay. And then second, once you recognize it, do you feel anything? Do you feel appreciative? Again, in proportion to what there is to appreciate. Someone gifts you with a penny, that has a certain scale of appreciation, or someone gives you a bite to eat, okay, and then someone gives you a full meal. It's okay for the appreciation to be in proportion to whatever the fact is, okay? And then third, do you express that appreciation when there are appropriate opportunities to do so? Do you let other people know what you appreciate about them, what you find worthy of respect, what you value in them? You express that. In my observation, most people are poor at expressing appreciation. So of the 407 people here besides myself, statistically, probably there's some opportunities in this group. And even in myself, I reflect on things that get in the way of appreciation, like I'm rushing around, or I'm a little exasperated, or, feel let down about something that can get in the way. So we can understand those things. We can appreciate that. We can recognize them. But still, how are you about expressing appreciation? And how might it serve you, in effect, as a kind of generosity yourself to express your appreciation to other people? Could be a server in a restaurant, could be a Uber or Lyft driver, could be a neighbor who does a little thing that helps you, could be someone working with your kids or your aging parents, could be a partner, could be a friend, could be a coworker. Recognize value. And when appropriate, express appreciation for it. What do you feel when you recognize value? And what do you feel when you express appreciation? You probably feel good. I mean, it feels good. And recognizing where there is value alongside corruptions and loss and poison and the rest is really helpful in dealing with corruptions, loss, and poisons of various kinds. Recognizing what is valuable helps us deal with attacks on what is valuable. And then, what do we do with people who, frankly, are not, they don't appreciate you? Maybe they hardly even see it. Step one, they don't even recognize qualities you have. Maybe because they're oblivious, perhaps they're preoccupied with other things. Maybe, frankly, at some level, it serves functions for them to overlook, dismiss, or ignore qualities in you or aspects of you or things you've done in the past or the present or are working toward that are valuable, that are worthy of value, that have value. If not even by economic value, not necessarily economic value, they have value in its own right. You make a piece of art. Maybe your form of art making is not their cup of tea, but still they can value the effort and the sincerity you brought to bear. Is your sincerity valued? Is your effort valued? Is your wholeheartedness valued? Is your commitment to practice valued? Is your patience, your forbearance valued? Think about people who just don't even see it. Maybe because they don't want to see it. Because if they saw it, they might have to acknowledge you. Or if they saw it, it might topple them from their perch of superiority and realize that, hey, you're on the same footing. Or maybe, wow, they've got something to really learn here. Right? It's quite something to reflect on this. And obviously it can stir up feelings. You could be helpless. You could feel helpless anger about this. This is a kind of an injustice. To me, there's a principle of justice that has to do with proportionality, that, for example, recognizing what is valuable in proportion to what is valuable. There's a justice there. And if something, you can be in situations where you put in a lot of effort, you do a good job, maybe it's not perfect, but it's really, wow, strong. And other people kind of glance at it, shrug their shoulders, grunt non-committally, and walk out of the room. To heck with that. That's just wrong. That's not fair. That's not just. Right? So I'm talking both about how we treat others, but I'm also kind of naming, what do we do with people who don't appreciate us in proportion to what is worthy of appreciation? And then name this, actually, in a forthright way. Obviously, there are pitfalls in this naming. We don't want to fall into the pits of ill will and hatred and, getting really identified with resentment and grievance. On the other hand, just looking over there and going, wow, you're kind of committed to not really appreciating me. Maybe because you just don't get it. What do we do now? So I'm talking here about what's it like for you when first, they apparently don't even see it about you, or two, even if they see it, they don't feel anything. And for sure, they don't feel moved to say something to you. What's it like for you? Can you be mindful of what it's like for you to be around that? Now, in my experience, there are two extremes here that are problematic. One extreme is based often on our history. We're very prickly about a thin, a thin soup of narcissistic supplies. And we get prickly at people who don't properly acknowledge us and approve of us. They're not sufficiently impressed by us. They're not giving us an ongoing incoming density, of approval and validation, acknowledgement, and applause. Okay, that's not so good. It's natural. I've been there. I know what that feels like, but it's not, it's problematic. Okay, so we practice with it. We're not stopped. We just kind of practice with that. That's one side of what is a kind of healthy middle way around other people who are really unjustly unappreciative. The other pitfall over here is where we just kind of get numb to it, or we feel, oh, it must be my fault. I'm just not sufficiently impressive yet. Oh, I got to work harder at it. Or we just buy into it because of our role socialization. Oh, gender socialization. Oh, I'm a stoic man. I don't really expect praise. Or oh, I'm a woman. It's not my job to be acknowledged. I'm here to give to other people. Where culture comes into it, where we put up with it. Or maybe we just don't want to rock the boat. Or we don't want to expose ourselves to the disappointment because it would be painful of asking for what we need and getting blown off. Or we realize over time, we just don't matter enough to them to validate us, to value us. Or maybe we do not want to expose ourselves to the disenchantment of realizing that, wow, in their system of values, who you are or what you care about or the initiatives you are investing in, they're kind of nice, but they're not enthusiastic about you. They're just not that into you, to put it a certain way, or into what you're up to for whatever, and that can be painful to face. So we have these two pitfalls, if you will, on either side that are not so good, of a middle place where we start with clear seeing of another person who just does not seem to really appreciate us or doesn't express it very much. And we watch for a while and we try to understand what this is about. And we may realize that they grew up in a family environment where nobody expressed acknowledgement. It just wasn't done. And meanwhile, they're caring and loving, but they just don't do that thing. That they don't even realize that it's a thing to do or that you could use it. Maybe because you're more vulnerable. You have more needs in that area than they do, perhaps, just because of who you are, your own background. They don't realize it. Other times you realize, wow, they're just never going to do it. They are committed to either devaluing you or having a very limited sense of appreciating and valuing you. That's their stand. And that's their MO. Maybe they're like that with a lot of other people, not just you. And you realize, oh, that's the way it is here. Oh, that's what's going to happen in the future. So you see clearly for a while in this middle path I'm describing, as we practice with a lack of appropriate appreciation from other people. Meanwhile, a second thing, very important, is to walk the proper talk yourself and to make sure that you, with other people and as appropriate with this person, are appropriately appreciative. That doesn't mean you have to adopt a style that's not your nature or culture, or you're maybe really a super effusive, like Maybe that's not your culture. Maybe for you, you're more plain spoken and matter of fact. I remember this. I told this story. This really manly man, in college. I was a young freshman, maybe 17. He was an older junior, maybe 21, a great athlete. He was on our intramural football team. And as he walked past me one day, he grunted in a very manly man way, "Henson, you're good. I'm going to throw to you more." And then he walked on by. I felt touched by a little demigod there. It's their style. Okay. So find your own style. So that's the second thing we can do, is to make sure we ourselves are modeling and demonstrating with people in general and with this person in particular what we're doing, what we're looking for. Because if you're giving it, appropriately, skillfully, authentically, you're become a lot clearer about what you're asking for. Okay. Third, you may find occasion to directly ask for what you want and kind of see what happens. So maybe somebody, thanks you for something, like you make a meal. You might, take a little risk here and in your way ask, "Oh, what did you like about it?" Or "What was your favorite part of?" Or "What did you find respectable or worthy of respect? What was the strongest part of that report I turned in?" All right. What was particularly helpful in how I was in that meeting? It's okay. And then you see what they do. Now, you might be violating a taboo in the relationship. It might be uncomfortable. They might blink a few times. And then you see what they do. And do they rise to the occasion on a fairly small ask, but a real one? Or do they get weird about it? And maybe later on, do they punish you about it? Sad but true, then, that's informative. You could do that. That's a third thing in this middle place. A fourth thing in this middle place would be to name it directly, such as with someone who's a significant person in your life. Could be in your family system, could be your partner, could be a key person you work with. I've had occasion recently to just kind of name that the feedback I was getting in a work setting seemed completely inadequate in proportion to everything I was actually producing. And if you're feeling damned by faint praise, as the saying puts it, where you're contributing a lot of high quality output and people thank you for your effort, like, "Oh, wow, you work hard," but they don't actually also talk about the quality of what you deliver in your family or with a friend or in the workplace. That's interesting. What's being left out? So maybe you start to name that in general. And then again, you see what people do. You're putting an ask on the table from now on, right? You can live without it, but you're basically saying, and you find your own way, and maybe in your relationship, "Hey, I love you," like in your partner, let's say, "I love you, I'm committed, and I just noticed that we don't express appreciation very much to each other." Take a hit yourself and then name it. And I just think it would be really sweet if every night before we go to bed, just say one thing that we appreciate about each other or thank each other for. Let's start doing that. For example, you find your own way into it. So, kind of wrapping it up here, I think in my observation, most people are pretty poor at expressing appropriate acknowledgement and appreciation to other people, communicating respect and valuing of others. That's a really beautiful form of generosity for us to practice ourselves, the giving of appreciating. And then what do we do when what's coming our way just doesn't feel adequate or in proportion to what's real? It feels maybe unjust. Some important things are missing. Now, what do we do then? And that's something I wanted to foreground here, to name mindfully what it's like for you, and to honor that and avoid the pitfalls on either side of getting, going to war on the one side, or on the other side, just not really being loyal to yourself and supporting yourself, finding a middle place. And then in the middle place of working something out with other people, I've talked about studying the situation, observing for a while, trying to understand what's going on. Second, modeling yourself, the way to be. Third, small asks around particular things. And then fourth, as appropriate, naming the topic of, appreciating altogether. And for me, this is very consistent with, this aspect of Buddhist practice that is really important, which is the value of generosity, really broadly.